It was February 2023 in Richmond, Virginia. The house still smelled faintly of his aftershave, the one he'd worn for 20 years. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, trying to memorialize my late husband's Facebook account. He died 5 months earlier, a heart attack, sudden and quiet. I thought closing his online accounts would help me move on. But when I searched his name, 2 profiles appeared. One had our anniversary photo. The other showed him holding a baby I didn't recognize. I clicked, thinking it was old. Then I saw the caption, "Our little girl." Finally, her name was different. Her timeline went back 15 years. That night, I realized the man I buried had lived another life and another marriage, 3 rows behind me at his own funeral. Grief is strange. It dulls your senses, then sharpens them when you least expect it. After Daniel's death, Marian Caldwell filled her days with small routines, washing his coffee mug, checking the mail addressed to Mister and Missus Caldwell, answering condolence messages that arrived in waves and then stopped entirely. The house felt larger without him, as if the walls had expanded overnight. She moved through rooms that no longer held the sound of his voice, his footsteps, the low hum of his laptop in the study. She was 55 years old, a community college administrator who'd spent 3 decades organizing budgets, advising students, and maintaining order in systems that otherwise fell apart. She approached her life the same way she approached her work, with lists, calendars, and quiet persistence. Daniel had been her husband for 27 years. They'd married young, built a modest life, traveled occasionally, and settled into a rhythm that felt permanent. But permanence, she learned, was an illusion. It was a Tuesday evening in late February. The sky outside her kitchen window was overcast, and the streetlights had just flickered on. Marian sat at the table with her laptop open and a mug of tea cooling beside her. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house settling. She'd been avoiding this task for weeks, memorializing Daniel's Facebook account. It felt final in a way the funeral hadn't. Closing his digital presence meant accepting that he wouldn't be logging in again, wouldn't be updating his profile, wouldn't be leaving brief comments on her posts. She'd spent the afternoon cleaning out the spare bedroom closet, sorting through old jackets and shoes that still smelled like him. The work had left her exhausted, but not in a bad way. It was the exhaustion of progress, of taking small steps toward something resembling normalcy. Now, as evening settled over the neighborhood, she decided to tackle one more task before bed. She navigated to Facebook's Help Center and read the instructions carefully. Memorialization required proof of death and a request form. Simple enough. The funeral home had provided her with multiple copies of the death certificate. She had one in a manila folder in her desk drawer, along with insurance papers, bank statements, and other documents she'd been slowly organizing. But first, she needed to locate his exact profile. She typed his name into the search bar, Daniel Caldwell. 2 profiles appeared. Marian blinked. Her hand paused over the trackpad. She stared at the screen, confused. She assumed it was a glitch, a duplicate account he'd forgotten about, maybe something from years ago when Facebook was new and people made multiple accounts by mistake. The first profile was familiar. She recognized it immediately. Their wedding photo as the banner image, the 2 of them standing in front of the church, young and smiling, 27 years ago. The profile picture showed Daniel at his desk at work, wearing his reading glasses, looking at the camera with that slight smile he always gave when he was being photographed. Below that were photos of their life together. Their dog, Max, a golden retriever who died 3 years ago. Pictures from a trip to Charleston they'd taken for their anniversary. Posts about his work as a systems analyst, occasional jokes about technology, updates about home repairs he'd completed. The second profile had a different banner image. Daniel standing beside a woman Marian didn't recognize. Both of them smiling. Both wearing wedding bands. The background was a garden, late afternoon light filtering through trees, flowers in full bloom. The woman was around her age, perhaps a few years younger, with shoulder-length dark hair and a comfortable smile. Daniel's arm was around her waist. The photo was recent. Within the last year, judging by his hairline, slightly receded, and the blue shirt he was wearing, the one she'd seen hanging in his closet. Marian's breath caught. She leaned closer to the screen. Her tea sat forgotten, growing cold. She clicked on the second profile. It was public. Not entirely open, but public enough to see posts, photos, and some tagged content. The profile picture showed Daniel and the woman sitting at an outdoor cafe, both holding coffee cups. The woman's name appeared in several captions: Lauren Devereux. Sometimes Lauren Devereux Caldwell. Marian scrolled slowly. Each post felt like a small shock, a door opening onto a room she'd never known existed. There were holiday photos, Christmas trees and Thanksgiving tables, birthday celebrations with candles and cake, dinners at restaurants she'd never heard of, small Italian places, seafood restaurants, casual cafes. A wedding album posted in 2008, the same year she and Daniel had bought their house in Richmond. She stopped scrolling. 2008. She remembered that year clearly. They'd been looking at houses for months, finally settling on the 3-bedroom colonial on Maple Street with the large backyard and the creaky front porch. They closed in July, spent August painting and moving furniture, and hosted their first dinner party in September. And according to this profile, Daniel had married someone else that same summer. Marian's hands were shaking slightly. She set them flat on the table, pressing her palms against the cool wood. She took a slow breath and continued scrolling. The photos went back years. Anniversary celebrations. 10 years today, 12 years and counting, 15 years with my love. Each post was dated, time-stamped, tagged with locations she didn't recognize. Restaurants in Chapel Hill. Parks in Raleigh. A beach house somewhere on the coast. She stopped scrolling when she reached a photo dated September 2022. Daniel was kneeling beside a crib, holding a screwdriver, assembling the frame. He was wearing jeans and an old t-shirt, the same outfit he wore when doing projects around their house. The caption read, "He still insists on doing everything himself." September. 2 months before his death. Marian clicked on the next post. A birth announcement. Pink balloons and soft lighting. A baby girl, born in early November. The caption, "Our little girl, finally. Born November 6th at 7:23 in the morning. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. We're in love." November 6th. 2 weeks before Daniel's funeral. Marian sat very still. The kitchen light above her seemed too bright. The silence of the house pressed in. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sweeping across the wall before disappearing into darkness. She didn't move. She just stared at the screen, reading captions written in the same affectionate tone Daniel had once used with her. Sunday breakfast with my love. 15 years today. It still feels like yesterday. Date night. Best decision I ever made. The dates overlapped theirs. Their entire marriage, 27 years, had run parallel to another. She scrolled further, matching timestamps to her own memories. A photo of Daniel at a restaurant, dated October 15, 2022. The same night he'd texted her to say he'd be working late at the office, that he'd grab dinner near work. Another photo, taken on their anniversary weekend in June 2021, showing him at a park 200 miles away, holding hands with Lauren, both of them watching a sunset. Marian reached for her phone with trembling fingers. She opened her photos and found their anniversary picture from that same weekend. They were standing in their backyard, holding glasses of wine, the evening light soft and golden. Daniel's smile was identical to the one in the other woman's photos. Relaxed. Content. Present. She set the phone down carefully. She returned to the laptop and began taking screenshots. Methodically. Without rushing. She created a new folder on her desktop and labeled it Estate Records. She saved each screenshot inside, banner images, profile pictures, captions, dates, tagged locations. She scrolled through the entire timeline, capturing everything that seemed relevant. Photos from holidays. Posts about everyday life. Comments from friends and family members she didn't recognize. She worked for over an hour. Her tea had gone completely cold. The house around her was silent. She could hear the refrigerator cycling on and off, the occasional creak of floorboards, the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere down the street. But inside the house, inside this moment, there was only the soft click of the trackpad and the glow of the screen. When she finally finished, she had 83 screenshots saved. 83 pieces of evidence documenting a life she'd never known existed. She closed the laptop slowly and sat in the dark kitchen, her hands folded on the table in front of her. She didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. She felt something else instead, a strange clarity, a sharpening of focus. Her mind was already organizing the information, creating categories, identifying patterns. This wasn't grief anymore. This was something different. This was a discovery. She stood and carried her mug to the sink. The tea had formed a thin film on the surface. She poured it out, rinsed the mug, and dried it with a dish towel. She folded the towel neatly and hung it on the oven handle. She turned off the kitchen light and stood for a moment in the darkness, looking at the familiar shapes of her home. The table where they'd eaten thousands of meals. The counter where he'd made coffee every morning. The doorway where he'd kissed her goodbye countless times before leaving for work. Or for his other life. She climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing. In the bedroom, she sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the wall. She thought about the funeral. The rows of folding chairs at the memorial chapel. The quiet hymn played on a keyboard. The closed casket draped in white lilies. She'd sat in the front row, flanked by colleagues from her work and a few of Daniel's coworkers. Behind her, the chapel had been about half full. Maybe 70 or 80 people. Friends. Neighbors. People from his office. She tried to remember who had been sitting 3 rows behind her. But the memory was blurred, softened by grief and shock. She'd been numb that day, moving through the service mechanically, accepting condolences from people whose names she couldn't remember, staring at the casket and thinking that it didn't look real, that none of it looked real. Someone had been there. Lauren. Possibly holding a 2-week-old baby. Mourning the same man. Sitting 3 rows behind the woman who thought she was his only wife. Marian lay down on the bed, still fully dressed. She pulled the comforter over herself and stared at the ceiling. The room was dark except for a thin line of streetlight coming through the gap in the curtains. She could hear her own breathing, slow and steady, and the distant hum of traffic on the main road several blocks away. Sleep didn't come for a long time. Her mind kept circling back to the photos, the captions, the dates. Every detail replayed itself in an endless loop. When sleep finally arrived, it was shallow and restless, full of fragmented images. 2 wedding photos side by side. A baby in a crib. Daniel's face, smiling, looking at someone just out of frame. She woke at dawn, earlier than usual. The sky outside was gray and cold. She lay still for several minutes, staring at the ceiling, remembering. Then she pushed back the covers and got up. Downstairs, she made coffee. Strong and black, the way she always did. She stood at the kitchen window and watched the neighborhood wake up. Lights flickering on in houses. Cars backing out of driveways. A man walking his dog past her front yard. Everything looked normal. Ordinary. The same morning routine playing out as it had for years. But nothing was the same. She carried her coffee to the table and opened the laptop. The estate records folder was still there, exactly where she'd left it. She opened it and began reviewing the screenshots methodically, one by one. She created a new document and started taking notes. Names. Dates. Locations. She built a simple table with columns for each category. As she worked, patterns began to emerge. Chapel Hill, North Carolina appeared repeatedly. That's where Lauren lived. Marian opened a map and calculated the distance. 2 hours and 37 minutes by car. Close enough for regular trips. Far enough to maintain complete separation. She opened her banking app and logged into their joint account. She scrolled back through 2 years of transactions, looking for patterns. There were recurring withdrawals. Cash withdrawals, always in amounts under $1,000. $900 here. $850 there. $1,200. $700. They appeared every few weeks, like clockwork. always at ATMs she didn't recognize, in cities she'd never been to. She scrolled further back. The pattern extended years. Small, steady drains on their account, so carefully managed that she'd never noticed. They'd lived comfortably enough. His salary as a systems analyst had been solid. Her salary at the college covered their daily expenses. The withdrawals had never been large enough to cause problems, never large enough to trigger questions. But now, seeing them all together, the pattern was unmistakable. She created a new spreadsheet and began logging each withdrawal. Date, amount, location. Within an hour, she had a record stretching back 5 years. The total was staggering. Over $75,000, withdrawn in small increments, carefully spaced to avoid detection. Marian closed the banking app and sat back in her chair. The coffee had gone cold. The morning light had grown brighter, filling the kitchen with pale sunshine. She looked around the room, the same kitchen she'd cooked in for 15 years, and felt like she was seeing it for the first time. Every object, every surface, every familiar detail now felt contaminated by what she'd learned. She stood and walked through the house slowly. The living room where they'd watched television in the evenings. The study where he'd worked on his laptop, the door always closed, his phone always face down on the desk. The spare bedroom where he'd kept his travel bags, his work clothes, his briefcases full of papers she'd never looked through. She went to the spare bedroom and opened the closet. His garment bags hung neatly, organized by color. She unzipped one and found 3 dress shirts, freshly laundered, with a dry cleaning receipt pinned to the plastic. The receipt was from a cleaner she didn't recognize, in a town she'd never been to. She checked the other garment bags. More receipts from cleaners in different towns. Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. None of them are from Richmond. She went to the dresser and opened the top drawer where he'd kept miscellaneous items. Old watches, cufflinks, a collection of pens. She sorted through everything carefully. At the back of the drawer, she found a small envelope. Inside were receipts from restaurants, hotels, gas stations. All dated. All from towns in North Carolina. She photographed each receipt with her phone, then returned them to the envelope exactly as she'd found them. In the closet, she found his briefcase. She opened it and sorted through the contents. Work documents. A notepad. A calculator. A folder of old papers. She pulled out the folder and opened it. Inside was a child's drawing. Crayon on construction paper. 3 stick figures labeled in uneven handwriting. Mommy plus daddy plus me, a house with a triangle roof. A sun with rays. The kind of drawing every child makes. Marian stared at it. She remembered this drawing. It had fallen out of his briefcase 3 years ago, maybe 4. She'd picked it up and asked whose it was. He laughed and said it was from a coworker's kid, that the child had been at the office one day and drawn pictures for everyone. She'd accepted the explanation without question. Now, holding the drawing under the morning light, she saw details she'd missed before. The date written in the corner in an adult's handwriting, October 2019. The name at the bottom, Emma. She photographed the drawing, placed it carefully back in the folder, and returned the briefcase to the closet. Before leaving for work, she made a detailed list in her notebook. Review all bank statements going back 10 years. Locate all insurance policies and beneficiary information. Check property deeds and titles. Review tax filings. Identify all shared accounts and assets. Document all receipts and travel records. Map pattern of trips against social media timeline. She dated the list and underlined it twice. Then she closed the notebook, gathered her work bag, and left the house. The drive to the college took 20 minutes. Marian listened to nothing, no radio, no podcast, just the sound of the car engine and the rhythm of the road. Her mind was already organizing the information, creating systems, and establishing priorities. This was what she did. This was who she was. When confronted with chaos, she built order. At the college, she moved through her morning with mechanical efficiency. She responded to emails, attended a budget meeting, and met with 2 students about their academic plans. She smiled when appropriate, nodded when expected, and contributed to discussions when called upon. No one noticed anything different. She'd always been composed, professional, someone who kept her private life entirely separate from her work. During her lunch break, she sat in her office with the door closed and opened her laptop. She navigated to the county clerk's website and accessed the public records database. She searched for property deeds under Daniel's name. Their house appeared, purchased in 2008, both names on the title. Nothing unusual there. But there was another property. A small house in Chapel Hill, purchased in 2012. Only Daniel's name on the deed. Purchase price, $175,000. Marian screenshot the record and saved it. She searched for the address on Google Maps. A modest single-story home on a quiet street. 3 bedrooms. 2 baths. A small front yard with a maple tree. She closed the browser and sat staring at her office wall. The afternoon light coming through the window cast long shadows across her desk. Outside, students walked across the quad, laughing and talking, living their ordinary lives. She thought about the house she'd never seen. The rooms she'd never entered. The life that had unfolded there while she'd been living her own parallel existence 2.5 hours north. Her phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn, her neighbor. Coffee tomorrow morning? Haven't seen you in a few days. Marian typed back, 7:30. My porch. Perfect, Evelyn replied. Marian set down the phone and returned to her work. She had 3 more meetings that afternoon, a budget report to finalize, and advising appointments scheduled for later in the week. She moved through the tasks with her usual precision, compartmentalizing the personal crisis into a separate mental space that she could access later, at home alone. By the time she left work, the sun was setting. The February evening was cold and clear, the sky turning shades of orange and pink. She drove home slowly, stopping at a grocery store to pick up essentials. Bread, milk, eggs, vegetables. She moved through the aisles efficiently, selecting items without thought, her mind elsewhere. At home, she unpacked the groceries and made a simple dinner. Pasta with vegetables, a glass of water. She ate at the kitchen table with her laptop open beside her, continuing her research. She found Lauren's professional website. She was a freelance interior designer, specializing in residential spaces. The website featured a portfolio of completed projects, testimonials from clients, and a contact form. Marian clicked through the portfolio. Living rooms, bedrooms, kitchens. Each space carefully designed, professionally photographed. In one photo, she recognized Daniel in the background, partially visible through a doorway. He was carrying a box, helping with a project. The caption identified the location as private residence, Chapel Hill. Their house. The one Marian had never seen. She closed the laptop and sat in silence. The house around her felt hollow, like a shell. She thought about selling it, but the thought was too large, too overwhelming to consider fully. Instead, she focused on smaller tasks. Things she could control. She opened her notebook and added to her list. Obtain certified copy of marriage certificate. Review life insurance policies and claim status. Consult probate attorney regarding estate. Document all evidence systematically. Create timeline of trips and absences. She worked until after midnight, organizing files, creating spreadsheets, building an archive of evidence. By the time she closed the laptop, her eyes burned with fatigue. She climbed the stairs slowly, changed into pajamas, and lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling. Tomorrow, she would continue. One step at a time. One document at a time. She wouldn't confront. She wouldn't accuse. She would simply gather facts and let them speak for themselves. Because facts, unlike people, didn't lie. The next morning, Marian woke before dawn. She showered, dressed, and made coffee. At 7:30, she carried 2 mugs out to the front porch. The morning was cold, and she could see her breath in the air. She sat in one of the wicker chairs and waited. Evelyn appeared a few minutes later, walking across the yard wrapped in a thick cardigan. She was 60 years old, a retired nurse with short gray hair and steady, kind eyes. She'd lived next door for 15 years, and they'd developed a comfortable friendship built on morning coffees and occasional dinners, never intrusive, always supportive. "Cold this morning," Evelyn said, accepting the mug. "Winter's hanging on," Marian replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the neighborhood wake up. A school bus passed. A woman jogged by with her dog. "How are you doing?" Evelyn asked eventually. Marian considered the question. "I'm organizing things." "Estate things?" "Yes." Evelyn nodded. "That's good. Keeping busy helps." "It does," Marian agreed. Another silence. Then Evelyn asked, "Are you sleeping?" "Some," Marian said. "Not much." "That's normal," Evelyn said. "Give it time." Marian almost laughed. Time. Everyone kept talking about time, as if it were some kind of healing force. But time didn't heal anything. Time just moved, indifferent and relentless. What healed was action. Decision. Control. "I'm managing," Marian said finally. Evelyn studied her. "You're keeping notes," she said. It wasn't a question. Marian glanced at her. "How did you know?" "You have that look," Evelyn said. "The one you get when you're working through a problem. Very focused. Very deliberate." "Is that bad?" Marian asked. "No," Evelyn said. "It's how you are. Just don't forget to breathe." Marian smiled slightly. "I'm breathing." They finished their coffee as the sun rose higher, warming the air slightly. Evelyn stood to leave, then paused. "If you need anything," she said, "I'm right next door." "I know," Marian said. "Thank you." Evelyn walked back across the yard, and Marian sat alone on the porch for a few more minutes. Then she went inside, rinsed the mugs, and prepared for another day. Over the following weeks, Marian's investigation deepened. She worked methodically, building her case one document at a time. She obtained a certified copy of her marriage certificate from the county clerk's office, dated June 19, 1996. She gathered every joint tax return they'd ever filed, each one signed by both of them, each one documenting their shared financial life. She reviewed their mortgage history, utility bills, and car registrations. Everything that demonstrated continuous cohabitation and shared assets. She organized everything chronologically in labeled folders, each document numbered and indexed. She accessed Daniel's work email through the executor credentials the company had provided. She found calendar entries that matched the social media timeline perfectly. Raleigh office visit on days when photos showed him at Lauren's house. Client meeting Durham on weekends when he appeared in family photos. She created a master timeline in a large spreadsheet. One column for date. One for an official calendar entry. One for actual location based on receipts and photos. One for social media posts. The pattern was perfect. Every trip, every late night, every weekend away, all of it mapped to his second life with geometric precision. In early March, she made an appointment with a probate attorney. She chose someone she didn't know, someone with no connection to Daniel or their social circle. The firm was downtown, in a brick building near the courthouse. She arrived early, carrying a leather portfolio containing her organized files. The waiting room was quiet, decorated in neutral tones. She sat in an upholstered chair and reviewed her notes until the receptionist called her name. Gina Morales' office was on the third floor, a corner room with large windows overlooking the street. She was in her early 50s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and intelligent, observant eyes. She shook Marian's hand and gestured to a chair. "Thank you for seeing me," Marian said, settling into the seat. "Of course," Gina replied, sitting behind her desk. "Your message mentioned estate matters. Tell me what's going on." Marian opened her portfolio. "My husband died 5 months ago. I've been settling his estate. And I've discovered some irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" Gina asked. Marian pulled out the first set of documents. "I believe he maintained a second household and possibly a second marriage." Gina's expression didn't change. She accepted the documents and began reviewing them carefully. Marian waited in silence, watching the attorney's eyes move across the pages. After several minutes, Gina looked up. "You've been very thorough." "I work in administration," Marian said. Documentation is what I do. Gina smiled slightly. I can see that. She leaned back in her chair. Walk me through what you've found. Marian did. She explained the Facebook discovery, the financial patterns, the property deed, the receipts, and travel records. She presented everything in chronological order, each statement supported by documentation. She spoke calmly, factually, without emotion. When she finished, Gina was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "This is complex. Under Virginia law, a subsequent marriage is void if the prior marriage was never dissolved. Your marriage clearly predates any other claim by 4 years. That makes you the lawful spouse for all legal purposes." And the estate? Marian asked. Everything depends on beneficiary designations. Let me pull the probate file. Gina turned to her computer and typed for a moment. There's an estate case opened under his name. Standard probate. And there's a pending life insurance claim. Filed by whom? Marian asked, though she already knew. A Lauren Devereux Caldwell, Gina read from the screen. Filed 6 weeks ago. The claim amounts to approximately $90,000. Marian felt something tighten in her chest. Can it be contested? Yes, Gina said. We'll need to file documentation proving your marriage date and demonstrating an active marital estate. Tax filings, joint accounts, continuous cohabitation. The more evidence, the better. I have all of that, Marian said, touching her portfolio. Gina nodded approvingly. Then we have a strong case. I'll file a temporary hold on the claim pending documentation review. This will freeze any proceedings until we can present our evidence. How long will that take? Marian asked. 6 to 8 weeks minimum, Gina said. Possibly longer. These cases can move slowly. I can wait, Marian said. Gina studied her. I need to ask you something. Have you had any contact with this other woman? No, Marian said. Good, Gina said. Don't. No calls, no messages, no social media contact. Let the legal process handle everything. Any direct communication could complicate matters. I understand, Marian said. They discussed fees, timelines, and next steps. Gina explained the process in detail: submission of evidence, insurer review, potential hearings, final determination. Marian took notes in her precise handwriting, asking questions, confirming details. Before leaving, Gina asked, "How are you holding up with all this?" Marian paused at the door. "I'm managing." "This must be difficult," Gina said. "Paper tells the truth," Marian replied. "That helps." Gina smiled. "Yes, it does. I'll be in touch within a few days about the hold." Marian thanked her and left. She drove to a copy center downtown and made 3 sets of every document. She had each page certified and notarized. The process took 2 hours. By the time she finished, she had 3 complete evidence packets, each one organized identically, each one indexed and labeled. She kept 1 packet at home in her fireproof box. She gave 1 to Gina. She stored the 3rd in a safe deposit box at her bank. By late March, spring had arrived in Richmond. The trees along Maple Street began to bud, and the air warmed slightly. Marian continued her routines: work, groceries, evening documentation sessions. She'd stopped checking Lauren's social media regularly. There was no new information there, and the habit no longer served a purpose. She'd gathered everything she needed. Now it was simply a matter of waiting for institutions to confirm what the documents already proved. At work, she maintained her professional composure. She attended meetings, reviewed budgets, and advised students. No one suspected anything was different. She'd always been private, self-contained, someone who solved problems quietly without broadcasting her struggles. One afternoon in early April, she received an email from Gina. The temporary hold had been placed on the insurance claim. The insurer was now requesting full documentation from both parties. They had 30 days to submit their evidence. Marian forwarded the message to her personal email and archived it. Then she opened her master timeline and reviewed it once more. Everything was in order. Dates, locations, documents, photographs. The story told itself through facts alone. She spent that evening preparing a cover letter for Gina's review. She wrote in clear, direct language. I am the lawful spouse of Daniel James Caldwell, married June 19, 1996, in Richmond, Virginia. Our marriage was continuous and active until his death on November 23, 2022. Enclosed, please find certified documentation proving the validity of our marriage, the continuity of our shared household, and the financial integration of our lives over 27 years. Any subsequent claim of marriage is invalid under Virginia state law. She attached a detailed index listing every exhibit by number and category. She saved the document and emailed it to Gina for approval. The response came the next morning. Perfect. I'll finalize and submit by the end of the week. Marian closed her laptop and stared out her office window at the college quad. Students sat in groups on the grass, talking and laughing. The afternoon was warm, almost summer-like. Everything looked peaceful, normal. But beneath the surface of her own life, the machinery of justice was slowly turning. Documents were being reviewed. Claims were being compared. The truth was being verified, one certified page at a time. And Marian, who had spent her entire career managing systems and maintaining order, trusted the process completely. Because the process, unlike people, was predictable. It followed rules. It required proof. And she had proof in abundance. That weekend, she cleaned the house thoroughly. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, and organized closets. She moved through each room methodically, eliminating dust and disorder, creating clean spaces. The work was physical, exhausting, satisfying. In the spare bedroom, she boxed up Daniel's remaining clothes. She separated them into categories: donate, discard, keep. The keep pile was very small. A few sweaters. The watch his father had given him. A leather jacket she'd bought him for his 50th birthday. Everything else went into boxes for donation. She carried them to her car and drove to a charity drop-off center. She unloaded the boxes one by one, handing them to volunteers who thanked her politely. She drove home feeling lighter, as if she'd shed a physical weight. That evening, Evelyn came over with takeout. They ate on the porch, watching the sunset. You sold his car, Evelyn observed. Last week, Marian said. How does that feel? Evelyn asked. Marian thought about it. Necessary. Evelyn nodded. That's good. Moving forward. One thing at a time, Marian said. They ate in comfortable silence. After a while, Evelyn said, You seem different lately. More settled. Do I? Marian asked. Yes, Evelyn said. Less restless. Like you've made some kind of peace. Marian almost smiled. Peace wasn't quite the right word. What she'd made was a plan. What she'd found was control. But she didn't correct Evelyn. Instead, she said, maybe. They finished dinner, and Evelyn helped clean up. At the door, she paused. You know where to find me, she said. I do, Marian replied. Thank you. After Evelyn left, Marian sat alone in the living room with a cup of tea. The house was quiet. The evening light faded slowly, turning the rooms blue and then dark. She didn't turn on the lights. She just sat there, thinking about the weeks ahead, the process unfolding, the final resolution that would eventually come. She thought about Lauren, somewhere in Chapel Hill, possibly filing her own documentation, possibly preparing her own case. Did she know about Marian? Had Daniel ever mentioned his first wife? Or had he kept that secret too, maintaining perfect separation between his two worlds? Marian suspected she'd never know the answers. And increasingly, she realized she didn't need them. The important facts were already established. The marriage dates. The legal precedents. The documented proof of her continuous relationship with Daniel. Everything else was just noise. By late April, spring had fully arrived. The trees were in full leaf, and flowers bloomed in gardens throughout the neighborhood. Marian planted herbs in pots on her back patio: basil, rosemary, thyme. She watered them each morning before work, watching them grow steadily larger. At the college, the semester was winding down. Final exams approached. Students filled her office with last-minute questions and graduation concerns. She guided them through their decisions with the same calm patience she'd always shown, helping them solve problems, identify paths forward. One afternoon in early May, her phone rang. Gina's name appeared on the screen. Marian stepped out of her office into the hallway and answered. Hello. Marian, Gina said. I have news. Marian's heart rate increased slightly. She kept her voice steady. Go ahead. The insurer has completed their preliminary review, Gina said. Based on the documentation we submitted, particularly the marriage certificate predating any other claim, they're prepared to deny the secondary claim and release the full proceeds to you as the lawful spouse. Marian closed her eyes briefly. When? They're issuing the formal decision letter next week, Gina said. Funds should transfer within 10 business days after that. Thank you, Marian said quietly. You're welcome, Gina said. I'll send you a copy of everything as soon as I receive it. They ended the call. Marian stood in the hallway for a moment, her phone still in her hand. Around her, students passed between classes, their voices echoing off the walls. Everything continued as normal. Life moved forward, indifferent to personal dramas playing out in the background. She returned to her office, closed the door, and sat at her desk. She stared at her computer screen without seeing it. The emotion she felt wasn't triumph or vindication. It was something quieter. Completion. Resolution. The satisfying click of a lock turning, a door closing, a chapter ending. She'd done what she set out to do. She'd documented the truth and let the system verify it. She'd reclaimed what was legally hers without drama or confrontation. She'd maintained order in a situation built on chaos and deception. And now, finally, it was done. That evening, she sat on her patio with a glass of wine. The sunset was beautiful, the sky streaked with orange and pink. The herbs in their pots had grown fuller, their scent filling the air when she brushed against them. Everything felt calm. Ordered. Right. She thought about what she would do with the money. Not all of it, but some. Something that would transform it from an inheritance from a failed marriage into something that served a greater purpose. An idea had been forming in her mind for weeks. A scholarship. Something for single mothers returning to school. Women who'd been knocked down by life and were trying to rebuild. Women who needed support and recognition and someone to believe in them. She would establish it at her college. Something modest, but meaningful. Enough to cover tuition and books for one student per year. She would name it something neutral, something that honored the idea of rebuilding rather than the person whose insurance money funded it. It felt right. A way to take something broken and create something whole. A way to redirect pain into possibility. The next morning, she called the college foundation office and made an appointment. The foundation director was a man named Robert Chin, in his late 50s, who'd worked at the college for 20 years. She'd collaborated with him on various projects over the years and respected his quiet competence. They met in his office, a small room filled with filing cabinets and framed photographs of scholarship recipients. I'd like to establish a scholarship, Marian said after the initial pleasantries. Robert looked pleased. That's wonderful. What did you have in mind? Something for single mothers studying technology fields, Marian said. Information technology, computer science, anything in that area. Specific and meaningful, Robert said, making notes. What amount are you thinking? Enough for one full year of tuition and books, Marian said. Approximately $8,000. Renewable if funds allow. Robert calculated quickly. An endowment of around $40,000 would generate that sustainably. Is that in your range? Yes, Marian said. Excellent, Robert said. We can establish the criteria, set up the application process, and have everything in place for next academic year. What would you like to name it? Marian had thought about this carefully. The Resilience Scholarship. Robert smiled. I like that. Simple and meaningful. They discussed details for another 30 minutes. Application criteria. Selection process. Award notification. Robert explained that the foundation would handle all administration, and Marian would be invited to meet recipients if she wished. I'd prefer to remain somewhat anonymous, Marian said. Perhaps attend the award ceremony, but not speak publicly. Of course, Robert said. Many donors prefer that. She left his office feeling something close to satisfaction. Not happiness exactly, but purpose. Direction. A sense that she'd taken something painful and transformed it into something constructive. 2 weeks later, the insurance money arrived. Marian transferred $40,000 to the scholarship fund immediately. The rest went into savings. She didn't touch it. She didn't celebrate. She simply noted the transaction in her financial records and closed her laptop. That evening, she sat on the patio with Evelyn. They developed a routine of weekend dinners together, casual meals on one porch or the other, comfortable companionship without pressure. "You seem lighter lately," Evelyn observed. "Things are settling," Marian said. "Good," Evelyn said. "You deserve that." They ate grilled vegetables and bread, drank iced tea, and watched the evening deepen. After a while, Evelyn asked, "Have you thought about what's next?" "Next?" Marian repeated. "With the house," Evelyn said. "Your plans." Marian had been thinking about it. The house felt wrong now, like a costume she'd outgrown. Every room held memories that had been rewritten, recontextualized by discovery. She couldn't look at the kitchen table without thinking of the night she'd found the second profile. She couldn't climb the stairs without remembering the documents hidden in closets, the receipts that told different stories than the official ones. "I think I'll sell," Marian said. Evelyn nodded slowly. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere smaller," Marian said. "Maybe near the river." "An apartment." "Something I choose entirely for myself." "That sounds good," Evelyn said. By late June, Marian had contacted a real estate agent. They walked through the house together, the agent making notes, taking photographs, suggesting small improvements. "The market's strong," the agent said. "Houses in this neighborhood sell quickly." "Good," Marian said. She spent the next several weeks preparing. She painted the front door. She repaired a loose board on the porch. She trimmed the hedges and planted flowers in the front beds. She worked methodically, making the house presentable without emotional attachment. It was just a property now, an asset to be liquidated. The listing went live in mid-July. Within 2 weeks, she had 3 offers. She accepted the highest one, a young couple expecting their first child. The closing was scheduled for late August. She began searching for an apartment. She wanted something small, manageable, in a different neighborhood. Something that would feel entirely new, unconnected to her previous life. She toured several places, noting features, comparing layouts. She found it in early August. A 1-bedroom apartment in an older building near the James River. Large windows. Hardwood floors. A small balcony overlooking the water. The building was quiet, well-maintained, occupied mostly by professionals and retirees. The rent was reasonable, and the lease terms were flexible. She signed the papers immediately. The scholarship ceremony took place in mid-August, a small afternoon event in the college library. About 50 people attended, scholarship recipients, their families, donors, faculty members. Robert Chin gave brief remarks, then introduced each scholarship and its recipient. When he announced the Resilience Scholarship, Marian sat in the back row and watched a woman in her mid-30s walk to the front. She was Hispanic, her dark hair pulled back, her expression a mixture of pride and nervousness. She accepted the certificate and shook Robert's hand. "This means everything to me," the woman said into the microphone, her voice shaking slightly. "I've been working minimum wage jobs for 10 years, raising 2 kids alone. I never thought I could go back to school. This scholarship makes it possible. To whoever created it, thank you. You changed my life." Marian felt something tighten in her throat. She stayed for the rest of the ceremony, then slipped out before anyone could approach her. She drove home in silence, thinking about the woman's words, about the idea of changing someone's life through quiet support. It felt right. More right than anything had felt in months. The house closing happened on a Thursday morning in late August. Marian sat at a long conference table with the buyers, their real estate agent, her own agent, and a title company representative. She signed paper after paper, initialing boxes, dating lines. The whole process took 45 minutes. When it was done, the title representative handed her a check. She folded it carefully and placed it in her purse. "Congratulations," the buyer said, a young man with an eager smile. "Thank you," Marian replied. "I hope you're happy here." "We will be," he said. His wife squeezed his hand, both of them glowing with the excitement of first-time homeownership. Marian left the office and drove to her new apartment. She'd already moved most of her belongings over the previous weekend. Furniture. Boxes of books. Kitchen items. the watch her father had given Daniel. A few photographs. Not much in the end. Most of her possessions had been sold or donated. The apartment felt spacious despite being small. Light streamed through the large windows, warming the hardwood floors. The balcony doors were open, letting in a breeze from the river. She could hear the faint sound of water, boats passing, gulls calling. She spent the afternoon unpacking the final boxes. She arranged her books on a shelf. She hung a few pictures. She placed the herbs she'd transplanted from the house on the balcony, watering them carefully. By evening, everything was in place. The apartment felt clean, orderly, hers. No ghosts. No hidden stories. Just a simple space where she could build something new. She made dinner, pasta with vegetables from the farmer's market, a glass of wine, a small salad. She ate on the balcony, watching the sunset over the river. The water turned gold and then bronze as the light faded. Boats moved slowly past, their lights beginning to glow as dusk deepened. After dinner, she washed the dishes and cleaned the kitchen. She moved through the tasks with practiced efficiency, finding satisfaction in the simple routine. When everything was clean, she made tea and carried it to the living room. Her laptop sat on the small table. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she walked past it to the bedroom. She changed into comfortable pajamas, brushed her teeth, and climbed into bed. The room was dark except for the faint glow of streetlights outside. The sounds of the city were muted here, softened by the distance and the river. She could hear the occasional car, distant voices, the low hum of the building's ventilation. She lay on her back, hands folded on her chest, breathing slowly. She didn't think about Daniel. She didn't think about Lauren or the second profile or the insurance claim or any of it. She thought about the river outside her window, the steady current moving through the city, the way water found its level and kept flowing. She thought about the scholarship recipient, the woman who'd thanked an anonymous donor, whose life had shifted course because someone had believed in her potential. She thought about the apartment, clean and simple and entirely her own. She thought about work tomorrow, the fall semester starting, new students arriving with their own stories and struggles and hopes. She thought about Evelyn, who'd promised to visit that weekend, who'd offered to help arrange furniture, who asked nothing and gave everything simply by being present. And she thought about herself. Marian Caldwell. I am 56 years old. A widow. An administrator. A woman who'd survived betrayal and rebuilt her life through patience and precision and quiet determination. She closed her eyes and let sleep come. It's been nearly 2 years now since that February night when Marian first saw the second Facebook profile. The apartment by the river has become home. She's painted the walls a soft gray. She's added comfortable furniture, chosen carefully for quality and simplicity. The herbs on the balcony have flourished, growing thick and fragrant. She still works at the college, still advises students, still manages budgets and organizes systems. Her life is smaller than it once was, but it feels more honest. She knows every object in her home. She chose every piece deliberately. Nothing is inherited or shared or compromised. The scholarship continues. 3 women have received it so far. She attends each ceremony, always sitting in the back, always leaving quietly. Robert sends her updates periodically. The recipients are thriving. Several have graduated. One has started her own business. Marian thinks about them sometimes, these women she's helped without ever meeting. She likes the anonymity of it, the pure act of support without needing recognition or gratitude. It feels clean, uncomplicated. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, she still thinks about that night in February 2023. The kitchen table. The open laptop. The moment the facts aligned and everything changed. She thinks about how quickly a life can split into before and after, how a single discovery can reorder every memory, rewrite every story. She never reached out to Lauren. She never sent a message or made a call. She doesn't know if Lauren discovered the truth about Marian's existence, or if she still believes Daniel had only one life. Marian prefers not to know. The story has ended for her, and she sees no reason to reopen it for someone else. The second profile still exists as far as she knows. She hasn't checked in over a year. There's no need. That chapter is closed. The baby would be walking now, talking, growing into a toddler with questions Marian can't imagine having to answer. She feels no animosity toward Lauren. No satisfaction in the outcome. Just a distant acknowledgement that they were both deceived, both living in carefully maintained illusions. The difference was that Marian had law on her side, the simple fact of precedence, of first marriage, of legal validity. She'd used that advantage not to punish, but to restore balance. To reclaim what was rightfully hers and redirect it toward something meaningful. She'd taken brokenness and created order. She'd transformed deception into truth, one document at a time. On a Friday evening in autumn, nearly 2 years after the discovery, Marian sits on her balcony with a book and a glass of wine. The weather has turned cool again, the air crisp with the promise of winter. The trees along the river are turning colors, gold and orange and deep red. The water reflects the sunset, turning the surface bronze. She reads for a while, then sets the book aside and simply watches. Boats pass. Joggers run along the river path. A family walks by with a dog. Ordinary life, unfolding in its endless variety. She thinks about the phrase people use about closure, that therapeutic concept that suggests a definite ending, a final door swinging shut. But that's not what she's experienced. What she's found is something else. Not closure, but integration. The past hasn't disappeared. It's simply been incorporated into a larger story, one she's still writing. Daniel exists in her memory now as a complex figure, someone she loved and someone who deceived her, both things true simultaneously. She's stopped trying to reconcile the contradiction. Some questions don't have answers. Some stories don't resolve neatly. Life is messier than that, more complicated, more human. What matters is what she did with the information once she had it. How she responded. The choices she made. The order she created from chaos. She finishes her wine and goes inside. She rinses the glass, dries it, and places it in the cupboard. She closes the balcony door and draws the curtains. She moves through her evening routine, brushing teeth, washing face, changing into pajamas. Simple rituals that mark the day's end. In the bedroom, she sets her phone on the nightstand, screen down. She doesn't check it. Don't scroll. Don't search for anything. She simply turns off the light and climbs into bed. The room is dark and quiet. She can hear the faint sound of the river, the distant hum of traffic, the buildings settling around her. She lies on her back, hands folded, breathing slowly. She thinks about the word power. How it's usually associated with loudness, with force, with dominance. But real power, she's learned, is quieter than that. It's the power of patience, of documentation, of letting truth speak for itself. The power of knowing when to act and when to wait. When to speak and when to remain silent. She'd exercised that power. Not through confrontation or revenge, but through procedure. Through the careful accumulation of facts and the patient navigation of systems. She'd used the tools available to her legal precedents, financial records, certified documents, to correct an imbalance. And now, lying in her own space, in a life entirely of her own choosing, she feels the full weight of that accomplishment. Not as triumph, but as completion. As a resolution. As the simple satisfaction of having survived and rebuilt and continued. She closes her eyes and lets sleep come. Her breathing slows. Her mind quiets. The room around her fades into soft darkness. And in that darkness, there is no anger. No grief. No weight of betrayal. Just the simple, undeniable fact that she's here. That she survived. That she corrected what needed correcting and moved forward with deliberate intention. The laptop stays closed. The phone stays silent. And the room, for the first time in years, feels like it belongs only to her. She sleeps deeply that night, and when she wakes the next morning, the sun is already rising over the river. She makes coffee, stands on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, and watches the light spread across the water. Another day. Another beginning. She thinks about all the people who'd asked her, in the months after Daniel's death, how she was doing. She'd always answered the same way, "I'm managing." It had been true then. It's still true now. But the meaning has changed. Managing isn't about coping with loss anymore. It's about maintaining order, building routines, living deliberately in a space that's hers alone. She finishes her coffee, goes inside, and begins her day. Weekend chores, grocery shopping, a walk along the river path, dinner with Evelyn later. Small tasks, ordinary and unremarkable. The kind of tasks that fill a life quietly, without drama, without need for an audience. And that, Marian thinks, is exactly how it should be. She'd spent 27 years living in a story someone else had written. A story with two versions, two timelines, two competing truths. She'd been a character in someone else's carefully managed fiction. Now, she's writing her own story. A simpler one. A truer one. And it doesn't require anyone's approval or understanding. It just requires her to keep going, one day at a time, with the same patience and precision she'd used to unravel the past. Evelyn comes over that evening, bringing ingredients for dinner. They cook together in Marian's small kitchen, working in comfortable synchrony developed over months of shared meals. Pasta, salad, fresh bread. Simple food, prepared carefully. They eat on the balcony, wrapped in sweaters against the cool air. The river is dark now, the lights of the city reflecting on its surface. They talk about ordinary things, Evelyn's daughter visiting next month, a book they'd both read, plans for the holidays. "You're doing well," Evelyn says at one point. Marian considers this. "Yes," she says. "I am. I'm proud of you," Evelyn says. Marian looks at her. "Why?" "You could have fallen apart," Evelyn says. "Many people would have. But you didn't. You handled everything with such dignity." Marian almost laughs. Dignity. It's a nice word, but it doesn't quite capture the reality. What she'd done was survive. She'd organized her pain into manageable pieces and dealt with each one systematically. She'd turned betrayal into procedure, grief into action. Not because she was strong or dignified, but because it was the only way she knew how to function. But she doesn't say any of this. She just smiles and says, "Thank you." They finish dinner, clean up together, and Evelyn leaves around 9. Marian stands at the door and waves as her friend walks down the hallway. Then she closes the door, locks it, and stands in the quiet apartment. This is her life now. Simple. Ordered. Entirely her own. No hidden compartments. No parallel timelines. No secrets waiting to be discovered. Just one story. One truth. One steady, continuous life. She makes tea and sits in her reading chair by the window. She opens a book but doesn't read. She just sits there, holding the warm mug, looking out at the city lights. She thinks about Daniel. Not with anger anymore. Not even with sadness. Just with a kind of distant curiosity. What had driven him to build two lives? Had it been intentional from the start, or had it evolved accidentally, one lie leading to another until the structure became too complex to dismantle? She'll never know. And increasingly, she realizes it doesn't matter. The why is irrelevant. What matters is what she did once she knew. How she responded. The choices she made. She'd chosen order over chaos. Documentation over confrontation. Legal procedure over emotional drama. She'd let the system do what systems do best, verify facts, establish precedents, restore proper order. And the system had worked. Slowly, methodically, without spectacle. Just as she'd known it would. She finishes her tea, washes the mug, and prepares for bed. The routine is comforting in its predictability. Every evening is the same. Every task completed in the same order. Brush teeth. Wash face. Comfortable clothes. Check that the door is locked. Turn off the lights. In bed, she lies in the darkness and listens to the sounds of the building. Footsteps in the hallway. A door closing somewhere above her. The quiet hum of plumbing. The sounds of people living their own private lives, contained within their own walls, each one carrying their own stories. She wonders, sometimes, how many other people are living with secrets. How many lives are more complicated than they appear? How many stories have hidden chapters, parallel timelines, carefully maintained deceptions? But mostly, she doesn't wonder. She doesn't speculate. She simply lives her own life, the only one she can control, the only one that matters. She closes her eyes and thinks about tomorrow. Sunday. She'll sleep late, make a good breakfast, and read on the balcony if the weather holds. Maybe walk to the farmer's market. Maybe call her cousin in North Carolina, the one she'd been meaning to reconnect with. Maybe just do nothing. Let the day unfold without an agenda or schedule. The freedom of it still feels new. The ability to make choices based solely on her own preferences, without considering anyone else's schedule or needs or secrets. She's 56 years old. She has a career she's good at. She has financial stability. She has friendships that are genuine and uncomplicated. She has a scholarship that will help women rebuild their lives for years to come. She has survived something that could have destroyed her. And she's emerged not just intact, but stronger. More deliberate. More certain of who she is and what she values. She thinks about the phrase people use when talking about difficult experiences: what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's a cliché, but like many clichés, it contains truth. She is stronger now. Not because the betrayal made her strong, but because her response to it did. Because she chose to face facts rather than deny them. Because she chose action over victimhood. Because she chose to build something new rather than trying to resurrect something dead. She drifts towards sleep, her breathing slowing, her mind quieting. And in that quiet space between waking and sleeping, she feels something close to peace. Not happiness exactly. Not the absence of pain. But something simpler and more sustainable: contentment. The knowledge that she's exactly where she needs to be, that the storm has passed, that the foundation beneath her is solid. She sleeps deeply and wakes with the sun. Sunday morning. The apartment is filled with soft light. She makes coffee and stands on the balcony in her pajamas, watching the river wake with the city. Joggers pass on the path below. A man walks his dog. A woman rides by on a bicycle. Life continues. Simple and ordinary and beautiful in its ordinariness. Marian sips her coffee and breathes in the cool morning air. She thinks about how strange it is that the worst moment of her life, sitting at the kitchen table, discovering the second profile, led directly to this: standing on a balcony in an apartment she chose, watching a river she loves, living a life that's entirely, authentically hers. The betrayal was real. The pain was real. But so is this moment. So is the peace she's found. So is the order she's created. She finishes her coffee and goes inside. She makes breakfast: eggs, toast, fruit, and eats at the small table while reading the newspaper. After breakfast, she showers, dresses, and decides to walk to the farmer's market. The walk takes 15 minutes. The market is busy, crowded with people buying vegetables and bread and flowers. She moves through the crowd slowly, selecting produce carefully, chatting briefly with vendors. She buys tomatoes, fresh herbs, and a loaf of sourdough bread. On the walk home, she stops at a bench overlooking the river. She sits for a while, watching the water, feeling the sun on her face. A family passes, parents pushing a stroller, a toddler walking between them holding both their hands. Marian watches them go. She thinks about Lauren's child, who would be around that age now. Walking. Talking. Growing up without a father, without knowing the full complexity of her own origin story. Marian feels no satisfaction in this. No sense of victory. Just a distant sadness for a child who'll grow up with questions no one can fully answer. But it's not her responsibility. That child has a mother who loves her. That's enough. That has to be enough. She stands and continues home. In her apartment, she puts away the groceries and makes lunch. She eats on the balcony with a book. The afternoon is warm, the sky cloudless. She reads for an hour, then sets the book aside and simply sits, watching the river, letting her mind wander. She thinks about work tomorrow. A new semester is starting. New students arriving with their own stories, their own struggles, their own hopes for transformation. She thinks about the scholarship recipient starting her first semester, nervous and determined. She thinks about the systems she maintains at the college, the order she helps create in other people's educational journeys. She thinks about how much of her life is about creating order from potential chaos. It's what she's always done. It's who she's always been. The discovery about Daniel hadn't changed that. It had simply revealed the necessity of applying those same skills to her own life. And she had. With patience and precision and quiet determination, she'd organized the chaos, documented the truth, and restored proper order. The afternoon fades into evening. Marian makes a simple dinner, pasta with the tomatoes and herbs from the market, a glass of wine. She eats slowly, savoring the fresh flavors. After dinner, she cleans the kitchen, waters the plants on the balcony, and settles into her reading chair. She opens her laptop for the first time in days. She checks her work email, responds to a few messages, reviews the schedule for the coming week. She checks her bank balance, confirms bills are paid, closes the laptop. No social media. No searches. No compulsive checking of profiles or timelines or anything connected to the past. Just necessary tasks, completed efficiently, then set aside. She reads until late, then prepares for bed. The routine is automatic now, comforting in its familiarity. Every evening is the same. Every night ending with the same rituals, the same progression toward sleep. In bed, in the darkness, she thinks about the phrase that's been running through her mind lately: the laptop stays closed. It's become a kind of mantra. A reminder. The laptop is there, within reach, available if needed. But it doesn't control her. She doesn't feel compelled to open it, to check, to search, to revisit. The story is told. The facts are documented. The resolution is complete. The laptop stays closed. And in that simple act, choosing not to engage, choosing to let the past remain archived and silent, she finds a freedom she hadn't known was possible. She closes her eyes and sleeps. Monday arrives. Marian wakes early, showers, dresses in professional clothes. She makes coffee and stands on the balcony one more time before leaving. The morning is cool and clear. The river sparkles in the early light. A new week is beginning. A new semester is starting. She gathers her bag and leaves the apartment. The drive to campus takes 20 minutes. She parks in her usual spot, walks across the quad as students stream toward buildings. The energy is palpable: first-day excitement, nervous anticipation, the buzz of new beginnings. In her office, she settles into work. Emails, meeting agendas, budget reviews, student appointments scheduled throughout the day. The work is familiar, grounding, exactly what she needs. At lunch, she eats in her office while reviewing files. A colleague stops by to ask about a budget question. They discuss it briefly, resolve the issue, part ways. Professional. Efficient. Uncomplicated. That's what her life is now. Uncomplicated. Every relationship is clear in its boundaries. Every responsibility is defined. Every choice is her own. She works until late afternoon, then drives home through the city. She stops at the grocery store, buys ingredients for the week, returns to the apartment as the sun begins to set. She makes dinner, eats on the balcony, washes dishes, and reads until late. The evening unfolds in its predictable rhythm. No surprises. No disruptions. Just the steady progression of ordinary tasks, ordinary moments, ordinary life. And it's enough. More than enough. It's exactly what she needs. What she's chosen. What she's built deliberately from the ruins of something that looked solid but was hollow at its core. Before bed, she stands at the window and looks out at the city lights. Tomorrow will be like today. And the day after that. And the day after that. The same routines, the same choices, the same deliberate construction of a life that's simple and true and entirely her own. The laptop sits on the table, closed and silent. The phone sits on the nightstand, face down and dark. And in the quiet darkness of her bedroom, Marian Caldwell closes her eyes and sleeps, content in the knowledge that she's survived, she's rebuilt, and she's exactly where she needs to be. The past is archived. The present is hers. And the future stretches ahead, undefined and open, waiting to be filled with whatever she chooses. One day at a time. One deliberate choice at a time. One quiet victory at a time. She sleeps deeply, dreamlessly, and wakes the next morning ready to continue. Because that's what survivors do. They continue. Every story here will stir your soul. Welcome to Spice and Sugar, your daily escape into real emotions, bold lives, and unforgettable lessons. Here, it's all about love, loss, laughter, and the quiet strength that carries us through. I share stories that make you feel, that remind you you're not alone, that every bitter moment can lead to something sweet. If you want to laugh, cry, and see life through stories that heal and inspire, subscribe and stay a while.